We're talking about that in the last segment here with MLB in studio. My producer, Mike Baruda, we were talking about kind of the state of the Tigers, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on them, because we were talking about how it's a convalescence of the fact that they've done very well over the course of the season. And a lot of this is, what have you done for me lately? There's the ups and downs of the major league season. But if people said, hey, they were going to be 5 or 6 games up at this point in the season, you don't know how that season arc goes, that people were going to go, oh, that's great. That sounds like they're gearing up for the stretch run. But because that trajectory is a little down, that's probably making people think of a little bit of a recency bias. But I'm curious what you see from your perspective, and kind of if you think that this is going to level out. We were talking about how the Veerling home run in the last series may be one of those turnarounds, because you never really know when it's going to happen. It can be something small, but that did feel like maybe a potential turnaround series there.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so funny that you mentioned about the division lead. I was just working on an article for Tigers Minor League Report, and I mentioned that exact same thing. You know, if you would have asked any fan before the season started, would you be happy with a 6-game lead on August 12th, I think it is, I think that everyone would have wanted that, and would have been happy about that. And I think that what you said about the ups and downs of the season, I think that's really what the key is. Unfortunately, the Tigers have lost a lot of games here recently, but I think that you have to take a big picture view of the season. And I think that lately, you know, you talked about the Matt Veerling home run. I thought that was a potential turning point as well. And I think that things are going to level out. I still have a lot of faith in the team. I'm hoping that the pitching evens out, and I think that that's going to be key for the rest of the year. But I do think that there's still a lot of good left in the season for the Tigers.
I know the fan base always wants the team to do more, and that's reasonable to say, hey, we want you to spend and trade assets and do what you need to do. But I'm curious about what you think, how you think their approach went during the trade deadline deals, because you cover a lot of minor leagues. You guys know the minor leagues better than the Detroit minor leagues, better than anybody at Tigers Minor League Report. And I'm curious if you liked the approach, because I'm sure you don't necessarily want to see them give up these prospects, because while most of the regular fans don't even know most of the names aside from maybe the top ones, you guys know the teams very well. So I'm curious what you thought about who they gave up, and if you were glad. I'm sure you were glad they hung on to, you know, the big names, the McGonagalls, the Clarks, the Briseños. But I'm curious if you would have wanted them to be more aggressive, or you liked them kind of saying, hey, maybe we can get a value veteran with a prospect that's not necessarily a top tier prospect at this time.
Yeah, it seemed like people were not super thrilled on Twitter about the about the trade deadline, and that's usually such like a harmonious space. Yeah, I think that it's always hard to know. I think that everyone thinks that they are, not everyone, but I think that a lot of people kind of think that they're an expert on how the negotiations go and stuff like that. And no one knows unless you're in the room. You know, there was a rumor out there that the Pirates were asking for Briseño for David Bednar. And, you know, I don't know about you, but there's just like no way that I would have done that. I am kind of in the middle about the trade deadline. I would have loved to see them get to aim maybe a little bit higher for a starting pitcher or for a couple bullpen pieces. But I like Kyle Finnegan a lot. And I actually think that Charlie Morton is going to be, I think by the end of the season, we're going to be grateful that the Tigers picked him up. And, you know, I think that Scott Harris was taking a little bit of heat online about, you know, some people are kind of a little bit of the smartest guy in the room with him. But I kind of I agreed with his approach a little bit and looking for volume in the bullpen because relief pitching is so volatile and you don't know. The Yankees are seeing that with Devin Williams. He was supposed to be their ace closer this year, and he's really been struggling. And you never know year to year with relievers, and you never know month to month. And you try to find relievers that are doing something well, and you think that maybe you could tweak something. I know that I was looking at, for example, Kyle Finnegan's pitch mix and trying to figure out. I wonder if the Tigers see something there that they think that they can optimize him a little bit more. And I think that they are. He's throwing less fastballs and more splitters and sliders, and his fastball is getting hit hard this season. And so I kind of agreed that if you pick up, 3 or 4 guys that have talent, and then I think that the hope is that 2 of them become leverage relievers. And I do actually end up thinking that that's going to be the case. I like Kyle Finnegan a lot, and I actually think that Paul Sewald is going to make a difference by the end of the year too. He's done it before in the postseason, and there's a lot to like with him. And I think that a pitch mix change could be in order for him too. I noticed that he's throwing more fastballs this year, and they're getting hit. But his slider is just as good as it was last year. And last year he was around 50-50 with sliders and fastballs. And this year it's been a little bit more 40-60 slider to fastball. And I think that the Tigers are going to ask him to even that out a little bit more. I also liked the Cody, I believe it's pronounced Hewer. I like that pickup a lot. I think that he's got a good arm. And then even Rafael Montero, I know that it hasn't gotten off to the best start, but he's got talent too. And I think that let's see where these guys are at. There's still 40 games left in the season, and I think that the hope is that them working with Chris Fetter and the rest of the pitching department, at least 2 of those guys are going to pop. So I can see why fans are frustrated, but I also understand Scott Harris not wanting to blow up the farm. For a reliever, for example. And then the last thing I'm going to say that I wanted to mention about that is I think after you get past the first 5 to 10 guys in the system that people would rank near the top, a lot of guys were injured and a lot of guys were kind of broke out this year, like Max Anderson. And how do you put a value on someone like Max Anderson where last year in high A he was age appropriate for the level, and he had a decent year, but it wasn't anything close to this year. So do teams value him for his performance this year, or do they look at last year too? And there's a lot of pitchers that are hurt right now that could have been included in the deals, but weren't. And I think that if you start to go down the list of prospects in like the 11 to 20 range, there might not have been as much as what people thought as far as value goes, and especially due to the injuries.
I think value is the key word there. You had a lot of great points in there that we'll break down here in the interview, but I agree with you as far as the value goes with a lot of the guys, because that's the big thing here. It's easy to say, hey, I want you to go out and get this guy. He's a high leverage reliever. He's a big bat. He's X, Y, and Z. But it's harder to then shell out the assets for that. You got to pay him. You got to pay for him, especially if you're trading for him. And I thought bringing up Bednar and Finnegan was a good point, because I don't think the difference between Finnegan and Bednar is big enough to give up one of those big prospects. And what they gave up for Finnegan, I thought made a lot more sense. And he's looked good in that role so far. It's a small sample size. But like you said, I think they went for more of a volume approach. They got Finnegan. That was kind of the premier guy of who they got. But I agree with you on Montero. If you watch the games, which I know you do, he's very close to having a lot better ERA and experience than you'd think by looking at the lines, because I've seen all of his appearances so far, and there was a couple calls that were a little bit borderline. There were some things that didn't really work out for him, but I like the movement to his stuff. He could be swing and miss, and you knew that he was going to be a guy that was going to be a little bit more kind of hopefully electric, but also maybe have some control issues, and you'd try to rein him in. But so far he's looked decent. But I agree with you on the whole that you're basically just right sizing the group. You hopefully get Morton in there. Hopefully Paddock produces as a starter. And there's a guy that we aren't talking about, but I'm hoping that Alex Cobb makes his way by the end of the season. I know that that's maybe not a popular opinion because nobody's really depending on him. He's been here in West Michigan, but man, that'd be a great guy to add in if he's healthy by the end of the season here. He doesn't have to be healthy the whole season, just at the right time in the season.
I agree. I'm still on the Alex Cobb bandwagon. I liked the move in the off season, and I give him a lot of credit. I don't know if you caught his first rehab appearance, but it looked painful watching him. And I think that it was Emily Walden on Twitter posted a kind of a comparison of his delivery when he first started his rehab assignment and then what it is now. And it does look a lot more fluid, and he knows how to pitch. And I am with you on that. And another guy that I'm kind of interested to see what happens with is Jose Urquidy. He's coming back from an injury as well. But I think between Morton, Paddock, Cobb, and Urquidy, that by the end of the year, two of those guys should be performing well, and they've all pitched in the postseason. They've all pitched fairly well in the postseason, and I think when it gets time, as long as the Tigers do make it to the postseason, I think that it's going to go back to the pitching chaos of last season a little bit. Besides Skubal, I think that you can make an argument that they should use an opener for the rest of their pitchers, including Jack Flaherty and Casey Mize. And I could see a world where Alex Cobb is able to get through the lineup, once in the postseason and do fairly well. It's just a matter of is there enough time left in the season to get him up to speed? But I think that there is, and I could see him contributing towards the end of the year for sure.
That's an interesting point about pitching chaos. I haven't heard anybody propose that. Pitching chaos for everybody but Skubal. Obviously, you're not going to do it with Skubal. You're going to try to pitch him as much as you possibly can. Coming back here with Joe Rampe of Tigers Minor League Report. Joe, I thought you made an interesting point before the break there. So you see them trying to throw people off by introducing the pitching chaos before all the starters except for Skubal. Is that because they've gotten a little bit of depth back in the bullpen so that they have more arms to do that with? Because that's one of the arguments we were making during the segment before yours. We were talking about how now you're kind of right-sizing everything. You're moving Melton and Montero and some of those other guys that you've been talking about to the bullpen, along with the acquisitions, now that you've kind of right-sized the starting rotation. Or are there other things that you're seeing from Mize and Flaherty as they kind of have their ups and downs over the course of the season that you'd like to see them take a different approach?
I think that AJ Hinch and Chris Fetter and the rest of the pitching department have kind of shown over the past year that they know how to attack pockets of hitters with pitchers that they think will be successful against that pocket of hitters. And, kind of just thinking about the postseason in particular, in that very first inning, let's say that you're facing the Dodgers, you're going to see Betts and Ohtani right off the bat. And if you think that a reliever is a better option to face those guys the first time through the order, and then let the starter get in after that to face a little bit more favorable matchups, I think that that's a great idea. I think that the key is that if you are going to do that, you do need to have, 6 or 7 relievers that you really trust in the postseason. And, we've talked about a lot of the names already. And I think that everyone, I think that Will Vest and Kyle Finnegan in the back of the pen, people are pretty comfortable with. I don't know about you. I'm still on board with Tyler Holton and Brant Herter, especially against lefties. I know that they've both had up and down seasons a little bit, but I think that they've proven that they are trustworthy if they're right. And the Tigers have 40 games left in the season to get them right. So that's 4 already. I think that Troy Melton is a huge wild card. He could give you a couple innings in the postseason, and his stuff is as good as anyone in the bullpen. I liked moving him to the pen for the rest of this year. When he was promoted, he was already at 87 innings, I think somewhere around there, and he only threw 100 last year. So they're probably thinking, 125 or 130 innings for him. So I loved moving him to the bullpen. I think that he might be the biggest X factor in the pen. And then, when you start to look at a few of the other guys, it's really about finding one or two from the one or two guys that you can trust from the rest of the relief corps. And we've talked about Montero. If they could get him right, I think that his stuff is almost just as good as Finnegan and Vest. It's just a matter of getting him into the strike zone a little bit more. I know Tommy Kahnle has kind of blown up here recently, but I still think that there's a chance that he gets back on track by the end of the year. And then I am really a big fan of Paul Sewald. I think that as long as they can get him into 10 or 15 games by the end of the year, 15 might be a stretch, but he will need to get back up to speed. But I think that he could be a leverage reliever. And then Brennan Hanafy got sent out. He kind of got lost in the roster shuffle there, but he proved last year that he's trustworthy as well, especially against righties. So I think, there's about 10 relievers that the Tigers have at their disposal. And the key is going to be to have 6 or 7 of them be trustworthy by the end of the year. And I think that they're going to get there.
They have some time to work that out. I'm glad you've highlighted some of the names that you have. I actually intended on talking with you about the draft, but this has been a good piece because for as much as we talk about the Tigers, I feel like a lot of these names have not been mentioned in some of the interviews that I've had, in some of the publications that I've been reading, because even like Alex Cobb, I mentioned him to somebody, I think it was last week, and he thought I was talking about Alex Lang down here in West Michigan. It was like we totally forgot about Alex Cobb. It's like he went to a different Alex that's been also kind of forgotten about. And same with Sewald. That was one that the only thing that I've really heard or read about him was somewhat negative, other than kind of the basic trade details. But I'm with you. He has been a high leverage guy. He's looked good in a setup role previously. I know he's dealing with the injury, but I do think the volume thing here is working. And I'm with you on Kahnle too. I know that Kahnle's stats early in the season, he was obviously a lot better. There were some things where I know with some of the metrics that they have, defensive metrics and different things, that he actually was a little bit under the amount of runs that he should have probably had against him early in the season. But even if that's true, I don't think that the current version is actually Tommy Kahnle either. I think there's a good spot for him, but I think we're hitting on a key through thread here, which is usage. We talked about it through this interview a little bit and the last one with Mike. I think guys like Tyler Holton and some of those guys that you're talking about, with all the pitching chaos, I do think they were a little bit overutilized down the stretch. They had to be. This isn't a criticism. Hinch used them beautifully, and it worked very well, and they were razor thin getting into the playoffs. But you look at Holton's stats over the last couple of years, that's a lot of usage for a reliever. Yes,
it is. And I think that I saw something that he may have had one of the best ERAs in baseball in 2023 and 2024. And I think that his his command has just been a little off this year, and it's understandable after getting used so often. Hopefully they can get him a little bit of rest here because they have to get this sorted out, and now is a good time to figure out what you have. So I am a fan of Holton and Herter against lefties especially, and that's kind of what I meant before when I was talking about those pockets. Is that a lot of teams that the Tigers could face in the playoffs have good left-handed hitters, and I think that just finding the right matchups, which AJ Hinch has proven that he can do. I think that we're going to see. We're talking about Tommy Kahnle, kind of the water finding its level a little bit, and I think that that's going to happen with Tyler Holton. And I saw something that, we were just talking about Paul Sewald a few minutes ago, and his fly ball rate, he's always been a fly ball pitcher, but I think that this year his ground ball rate is down to like 12% or something. And I think that that's just naturally going to go up. So hopefully he's given up all his home runs already this year. And like we said, the water finding its level. I'm just hoping that that's what we're going to see from him and Tyler Holton, is that and Tommy Kahnle is that their performance is going to even out, and if it does, I think that the Tigers will be in business.
I agree. I think it's funny because for baseball fans, we all know that baseball is a momentum game. It's an up and down game, and you have a long season, and you have these different pockets where you're hot and you're not hot. You knew they weren't going to continue at the pace they were at the beginning of the year. It just didn't seem that sustainable, especially with the injuries and everything. But it's when you have that downswing, and if you're having it now, you can build back up. And like you said, Joe, you're checking other pitchers out, you're looking at lineup fits, you're looking at situations where hopefully you do have enough of a buffer where you can kind of situationally identify whatever you need to for the different players, and then launch these guys as you're getting into the postseason. Whereas they were in a totally different situation last year. They were hanging on with their fingernails, just trying to make it into the playoffs. And that's very different to try to continue to knock down those games and knock out those games and catch up to the different folks there. So it's an interesting time in the season, but I'm hoping it'll tick back up. But I appreciate the conversation. Great stuff. Good points as usual. And I want to make sure you tell people where they can follow you guys here.
Yeah. I am so happy to be a part of the team at Tigers Minor League Report. I was a huge fan of those guys before I started writing with them. So we're at TigersMLReport.com, and the Twitter handle is the same place. My buddies there do an awesome job. They just released our most up-to-date prospect ranking. I would encourage people to check that out if you have time. So yeah, TigersMLReport.com, and I think on Twitter it's TigersMLReport as well.
Definitely check them out. And I always want to say guys, but we've got Ashley and others in the mix. So
exactly. Guys and gals.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. It's a good crew down there, and you'll be hearing more from them as the season goes on. But I appreciate you coming on the show, Joe, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Great. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Talk to you later.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.